with siege tanks, but and I also am a little disappointed that that game was from earlier in the beta. I was kind of hoping we'd see something a little bit more current from patch 13, but hopefully our next game will have that. For those of you that are new to my casting style, I do not watch these games before I cast them. I think that kind of takes away a little bit of the surprise element that I think is very, very important to making sure that things are um, kind of as spontaneous as possible. You don't want to lose any of that authentic feel that you get when watching a game for the very first time. That's not the way that I cast. I mean, I could do things that way, but I prefer not to. Okay, so we have now our. I am going to be switching over into our Protoss replay pack, and well, this is interesting. It does look like, wow, RemarK's got a lot of different. No, he's using what looks like a Korean account. There's some characters here that I don't quite recognize, but this is too good to pass up. I'm going to be loading up. Oh, maybe not. 12. Oh, I guess I'm just going to be loading up this game. I accidentally clicked on this one, double clicked on it, so I have no idea which game I just loaded up. There were a couple games there versus Sella that I was looking at there for a moment, but I think we'll save that for next. I have no idea what game this is going to be, but I do know what map this is going to be. This is going to be on the Akalon Flats Heart of the Swarm beta map. This map was just recently this is the Akalon Wastes version, excuse me. This map was just recently adapted to the Wings of Liberty Ladder Edition, so a lot of players have become familiar with it, but I'll get to that in just a moment. We have introductions that are in order. We have our red Protoss player spawning down here in the bottom right. He is Halfstorm, and spawning up here in the top left, we have our our replay pack submitter. We have our blue Protoss player. I cannot read the character that he is actually using for the beta, so I'm just going to be calling him by by the name that I know him by. He is RemarK. He plays for Team Fallacy. Team Fallacy doing pretty well in the last ISTL that I casted of him. RemarK being a someone that I've casted with before. He's a very very good Protoss player. Really nice guy too. Alright, so I wasn't expecting to cast a Protoss versus Protoss, but that's just the way that the cookie crumbles sometimes. And so here we go. Now, there are a lot of, and actually now that I think about it, Protoss versus Protoss is going to be a really nice demonstration of some of the differences that Heart of the Swarm has to offer for Protoss players, so I guess this worked out pretty well. The biggest difference, of course, being the addition of this mothership core, which does give Protoss players a very, very strong defensive tool for holding off a lot of the early aggressive styles that we see out of Protoss players in Wings of Liberty. It's hard. I don't want to say impossible, but it's really hard to fight to forgate a Protoss player that's using this. That's using the energized cannon on that mothership core that just outranges like every Protoss unit in the early game. It makes it very, very difficult to actually attack a Protoss player that has that mothership core available. So both players have gone for a pretty early gas at 13 supply at around instead of 14. And I can only assume that's going to be because they want to get out a mothership core as early as possible. Protoss players have been neglecting the mothership core in some of the other matchups. Probably the most glaring has been in Protoss versus Terran, but in Protoss versus Protoss, it's really the matchup where the mothership core probably shines the most in the current metagame on beta. So I'd be very surprised if these players did not go for a mothership core immediately after the construction of that cybernetics core, and by the way that they took their gases, I almost want to say that's exactly why they took it when they did. By the time the cybernetics core should finish for both players, they should have just enough gas to get warp gate tech started with a mothership core following very, very quickly afterward. But RemarK is actually not going to be going for that mothership core as early as I thought he was. He is instead going to be going for an early stalker. This early stalker is going to allow him to get out to deny map control, excuse me, from that probe, and actually his opponent is going to be going for that as well. So both players are actually just completely going against what I just said about the mothership core being kind of a staple of this matchup. Halfstorm is actually going for a double gateway. So this is actually going to tell me that he's going to be opening with a couple of stalkers to get out on the map. potentially put some aggression on his opponent, and also potentially deny him from going for an expansion. But RemarK is not going to be going for that expansion. Instead, he's going to be dropping down 2 additional gateways. It looks like he is going to be going for some good old-fashioned 3-gate, for some 3-gate pressure. I don't want to say this is going to be a big attack, and I don't want to say that this is going to be with a robotics facility added in, because he does not have that gas down. It does look like he just wants to get these 3 gateways down in order to go for a little bit more of an old school 3-gate expand, and that is exactly what it is going to be. Meanwhile, HASStorm has gotten out the Mothership Core. There it is in all of its bright Mothership Core goodness. I really like the model of this unit, guys. I can't stress it enough. The fact it looks so cool when it transforms into a mothership. It just cuts all like glowy and sci-fi. It's so cool. Like, it really fits like the advanced like alien like theme of Protoss so well. I mean, even if the Mothership Core, in my opinion, has a couple of problems with it, just from a balance standpoint, like the fact that Envision is no longer on the Mothership Core, for example, just kind of proves that it's not quite where I think Blizzard wants it. Thematically, the unit is just so cool and fits the race so well. So I'm so proud of Blizzard for coming up with it for that reason, if nothing else. We do have a Stargate now being thrown down for HASStorm. I don't see where it is, though. It's here in the back of the base. And RemarK is, like I said, going for that 3-gate expand. And the presence of these stalkers out on the map is, of course, denying HASStorm from being able to really go out on the map to deny it. But, of course, he is going to be going for this Stargate following it, so he's going to be going for what is probably going to be a little bit of Oracle pressure, if not some Phoenix pressure, on his opponent. And this is playing out a little bit normal as far as Protoss versus Protoss goes. RemarK does, of course, have a slight advantage at the moment, considering that he is going to be going for that double probe production. However, HASStorm does have the option to just go for a very, very large attack and just deny RemarK. Just deny Mark and punish him for this greed that he's going for. I say greed because getting an Nexus this early in Protoss versus Protoss is pretty risky, and most players will tell you that. And I still don't like the fact that RemarK just has completely neglected the Mothership Core at all, especially if he's going to be going for the second Nexus. I really think that that would be a nice addition to his defenses right now if he was going to be going for that. HASStorm is going to be clearing out these rocks over here in order to access his third base. And this is actually the big difference between, now that I have a moment to just kind of talk about it, this is the main difference between this map on Beta and this map on the Wings of Liberty ladder, is the presence of this destructible rock tower at both of the both the third expansions for both players. You could call this the third expansion, although there is also this base right here that you could take that could easily be a third base as well. This collapsible rock tower, if you destroy it, will throw down a big section of destructible rocks right here, which will block the third base from being attacked, which is, of course, very, very useful if you want to deny things like circling run-bys, Hellion harass, all sorts of different reasons why you would want to take this out as quickly as possible. However, if you are a Zerg player, you might want to keep that open, because it does, of course, give you multiple avenues out of your base if you want to be like the more mobile player. So this is, of course, a strategic decision that the player has to make of whether or not he wants to remove those rocks or whether or not he wants to keep them there. So we have the first Oracle for HASStorm getting into RemarK's base. These Oracles, of course, as you can see, do a lot of damage to probes, and by a lot, I mean a lot. 5 probes have already gone down. I think the Oracle will just be able to get away from RemarK's defensive forces here. Oracles are, of course, so fast with that 3.38 movement speed. This Oracle is going to get away, but 5 kills already gone down. Oracles are so powerful at killing workers. It's actually kind of ridiculous how powerful they are. A single Oracle, of course, killing 5 workers. Even though RemarK reacted to it pretty quickly, Oracles are just such a dangerous threat that you always need to be careful against them if you are any race, really. They do a very good job at forcing out turrets, at forcing out spore crawlers, just overall making your opponent feel very, very uneasy. Even the threat of Oracle harassment has drastically changed the way that I play against Protoss these days on the ladder, both in 2v2 and in 1 versus 1. You cannot neglect your air defenses, because if you do, you could just lose your entire mineral line so quickly. And so it's really a nice tool if you're a Protoss player to be able to have that in your toolkit, the ability to just pressure your opponent into reacting to with air defenses, something that they don't really have much access to in Wings of Liberty. So RemarK is doing just that, though. He is reacting. He is parking 2 stalkers over here in his mineral line. If this Oracle comes back, it will not be able to get very many probe kills at all, potentially just maybe 1 or 2 before it is killed, because it did lose some health on its health pool. So the stalkers are going to get some damage up on this Oracle. The Oracle is on a shift command, so it is not going to be able to actually get away. That Oracle, which does cost 150 gas, was destroyed by those two stalkers from RemarK with only 5 probe kills. Now, unlike Banshees, Oracles do cost 150 gas, which drastically increases the number of workers that they need to kill before they can realistically, quote-unquote, pay for themselves. Banshees require 6. Oracles require more on the level of 8 or 9 if they really want to get the maximum effectiveness out. If you really want to get the cost of the investment of the Oracle in, you really have to kill more like 8 or 9 probes if you really want to pay for the unit. Which is, of course, the one drawback of it. It's a harassment unit, sure. It kills probes really quick, sure. But it's expensive, so it does have that drawback. These, however, are units that don't really have much of a drawback on Heart of the Swarm beta right now. It is the Void Ray. They are so powerful on beta, and with these Void Rays actually in this mix, I'm wondering if... Well, actually, I think RemarK still has plenty of units here to actually attack. He does, of course, have this Mothership Core that he can recall back to, even if he needs to. There are a lot of Blink Stalkers in this army right now. These Zealots are going to try and go down the map and potentially block for those Immortals and Void Rays up on the high ground, but there's just so many Stalkers that those Zealots get obliterated very, very quickly. These Void Rays do have the Prismatic Beam research. They are going to be taking down these Stalkers very, very quickly, and with Immortals also in the mix, a lot of Stalkers are going down. The Photon Overcharge has been applied to that Nexus. The Nexus is firing very, very rapidly on those units from RemarK, but it does look like RemarK just has too many units right now, and with this very powerful timing attack from RemarK, I do think he will be able to clear out his opponent with this attack. I just don't think that Halfstorm has enough units to actually be able to hold this off, even though he does have Void Rays, and even though Void Rays are very, very powerful against Stalkers, he just wasn't able to hold that attack off. So, this is actually a really kind of an interesting display of, and everything kind of goes very normally, even if it does look a little bit different from how it looks on Wings of Liberty. RemarK goes for a relatively early Nexus, and Halfstorm gets his Nexus down much, much later, which of course allows RemarK to get out this extremely heavy supply difference in just pure Blink Stalker numbers. And I mean, the rest was pretty much like... RemarK actually lost that fight. In terms of how many units he lost way more units than his opponent. The resources lost does, of course, take into consideration the fact that Halfstorm is losing buildings as well as the Mothership Core defensively and whatnot. But RemarK lost a lot of Blink Stalkers in that attack, but it didn't matter because he had so many. He had... How many gateways is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gateways. He had 6 gateways down versus the 5 of his opponent, who wasn't really able to produce all. He just wasn't able to match the production that RemarK had because of that earlier Nexus. So just like Wings of Liberty, if you are the Protoss player going for a very early expansion and you manage to get it out, it does of course put you much further ahead of your opponent. And so that's really a very, very straightforward game. There's really not that much to talk about. It's just kind of it kind of boils down to he got out that Nexus. Halfstorm tried to go for some harassment with those Stargate units with the single Oracle, but it just didn't do enough. It was only 5 probes. It didn't do enough to really stem the economic advantage that RemarK had, which of course allowed him to just, you know, come up with a really big timing attack and win the game. Stargate units are expensive. You can't get them out in the kind of numbers that you can get, say, robotics tech units out on just one base. So it's very difficult to hold timing attacks like that Blink Stalker attack from RemarK if all you have is a single. If you're really only mining on one base with only some probes at your natural, you're not going to have the ability to hold off that attack. All right, so I think this actually might be... Alright, this sounds fun. Alright, so the title of this replay is called PVT New Units Galore, PS I Hate Widow Mines. So that is the title of this replay, and it is actually from a old version of this game, so I don't know... Excuse me, if I want to actually load that one up. Let's do this instead. This is submitted on January 9th. Yeah, that one's from November 24th. So it's a really, really old replay. Actually, a lot of these are really old replays. All right, let's go from this one from January 9th. This is gonna, and the reason why I'm picking this one is because of the map that it is on, and also because it is a Protoss versus Terran. This is called PvT Charge Lot High Templar. So I'm assuming that we are going to be seeing some Zealots and some High Templar. And like I said, one of the reasons why I want to choose this particular replay is because of the map that it is on. This is on a really cool template. I mean, just look at this template. I know I have to load this up for just a second. But just take a look at this template. This template is beautiful. This is the map Star Station, and literally on this map, you are aboard a mothership and you are fighting a big battle on a Protoss mothership. It is such a cool template. Bravo to the Blizzard Arts team for coming up with this one. This is a gorgeous map tile set. Now, this map itself I have some issues with, which I'll get to in a moment, but the tile set itself is just gorgeous, and I love it so much. Like, I'm waiting for the Blizzard map community to get a hold of this template and just put it through its paces and put out some really brilliant maps with it. So, with my love affair of the map officially over, let me get into some player introductions. And actually, this is gonna be the hardest player introductions ever. Look at these names. I know that this red Protoss player spawning down here in the bottom right is RemarK, but I have no idea who this is spawning over here in the top left. I really wish I could read Asian characters. Is this even Korean? I don't recognize these symbols at all. Okay, so we have our blue Terran player, Terran, spawning in the top left. I really wish that I was able to read these names and what they meant, because that would give me such a better idea of who is actually playing. I mean, this could be one of my favorite players in StarCraft 2 playing Terran right now, and I would never know it. Both of these replay packs, in case I haven't already mentioned it, and now that I think about it, I don't think I did. Both of these replay packs are, of course, at the Grandmasters level on beta. Now, that has... It's kind of funny that I should say that, because it's hard to really determine just where Grandmaster's skill level is in comparison to Wings of Liberty Grandmaster's skill level, especially since the beta is global and not just based off of one region. So it's really hard to say what Grandmaster's skill level really means in beta, especially considering that the metagame is completely brand new. But for what it's worth, these guys do know what they're doing enough to be considered Grandmasters players on the beta. So I just had to clear the air on that one just to give these guys a little bit more credibility. Some of these games have looked really, really weird and could easily be misinterpreted as just low-level games if players did not already know what kind of players they were dealing with. Okay, so coming over here from our Terran player, we have a gasless expansion, which goes against what I said in the previous game of that this build has kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. But this just kind of symbolizes, if you are a Protoss player and you see the fact that your Terran opponent is going for a gasless expansion, this does symbolize a few things to you. It does mean that he is more interested in using bio units, A. And B, it does mean that you don't have to worry about a lot of the really weird timing attacks that have been propping up in the beta that have been possible thanks to going for an early gas. You don't have to worry about things like Reapers. Oh, and this replay is actually from replay pack 12 or 13, where the Reapers can be built from a barracks, or just a single barracks that doesn't require a tech lab. So we'll have to see if that actually plays in. There's a lot of things I want to get to about this, but first let me finish this point. If you see that your opponent is going for a gasless expansion, you don't have to worry about really early Reapers. You don't have to worry about things like proxy Hellions, and you don't have to worry about things like really fast siege tech, because your opponent is going to be going for that earlier command center. It does allow you to go for an earlier Nexus yourself. So RemarK is going to be going for this one gate expand build. He did, however, bank some gas before he was able to actually drop that, which tells me, there it is, it is going to be going for a single sentry. Yeah, so I thought he was actually going to be going for the gas again with the Mothership Core, but instead he's just going to be going for a single sentry. So I'll have to ask RemarK the next time I talk to him what he doesn't like about going for an early Mothership Core, because I just feel like the Mothership Core would be a better investment overall if you're trying to be defensive than just a single sentry would be. RemarK is poking with that single stalker. He almost loses it as those Marines come down the ramp to challenge it. It is going to sit over here while it waits to recharge its shield. Its buddy's kind of sitting there going like, all right, come on, hurry up. We got some harassing to do. So here go these two stalkers. They are going to deny the construction of this bunker. RemarK has to be very careful. He doesn't want to lose that stalker. Oh, that stalker dying to those Marines at the early game does hurt the Protoss players so much. Stalkers are so expensive this early in the game. The fact that they cost 125 minerals is one thing, but the fact that they cost 50 gas, you don't want to lose stalkers to Marines if all you're trying to do is poke at your opponent this early if you can avoid it. So just a bad loss there for RemarK, but it's not the end of the world, as our Terran player drops down an engineering bay and goes for that tech lab. So the Terran player is going to be going strictly for bioplay by the looks of things. We are not seeing a factory. We are not seeing things like reactors that are going to symbolize a very heavy Reaper opening. This is as standard as you can get in Terran versus Protoss. He's going to be going for strictly bioplay. And because this is the patch where the Reapers are available at the barracks, this also means that he is not going to have the benefit of the Caduceus reactor upgrade that brought about so many interesting things. And I say interesting in quotations because interesting is not always a good thing. It brought about a lot of interesting dynamics in Terran versus Protoss. Because you were able to get such ridiculous levels of healing on those bio units. So this is going to be bio without that additional level of healing, which of course is going to make especially Psionic Storm far more effective. When Caduceus Reactor was available, Psionic Storm just did not have the same oomph to it, because you would lay it on your opponent and you'd be like, yes, I landed a storm, and nothing died. You're like, well, how come nothing died? I just landed a storm, and that's because that big blue beam of that big like bright green beam. It's so green it's almost blue. That big bright green beam of death was just like, no bio units shall die this day. And you're like, no, but I wanted to kill bio units. I'm really getting off on a tangent here. Alright, so Factory is going down for our Terran player, who has not started combat shields just yet, but is of course getting out stim, and he's going to be going for a lot of Marines by the looks of things here. 2 reactors going down on those barracks and no tech lab, and so RemarK is clearly onto this. He sees the number of Marines that his opponent has out on the field, and he's going to be going for a robotics bay very, very quickly onto base. Now this is a very good build if you see that your opponent is going for this very heavy Marine style. This very heavy Marine style is effective if you are playing a straight macro, I don't want to attack you until I have a death ball strategy, because this allows the Terran player to get out on the map with just straight mineral units. It allows them to get their upgrades up so much quicker than they would if they had to invest very heavily in Marauders. And the other thing that it does is it, of course, allows you to spend just all of your gas on getting things out like essential researches and, of course, medevacs. So getting medevacs out a little bit earlier and in higher numbers than you would be able to if you were investing very heavily in Marauders at the beginning, it's just a really nice way as Terran, if you're going to be trying to be aggressive against your opponent who's playing a very heavy macro style against you. But RemarK is going straight for this Colossus play, and against straight Colossus, Marines have a very difficult time. They get obliterated so fast by Colossus, especially Colossus that are going to be upgraded the way that RemarK is going to be. He should be starting that Thermal Lance upgrade in just a moment. He already has the gas for it. He's just waiting for the minerals to be going right about now. Alright, well, Thermal Lances should be starting pretty soon. I think RemarK is going to be trying to go for some kind of 2-base timing with this. I'd be very surprised if he tried to just take a 3rd base. It's very difficult to defend against drop of play with Colossus. They are much better when utilized in an aggressive fashion if you're going to be going for them this early. So this attack from our Terran player, however, I say that they're not as good defensively, but they're going to be perfect for holding off this attack defensively. There are force fields already in place. The Marine is going to see that that Colossus is already on the field, and that is, of course, going to force our Terran player to back up. He might go for some drop play here, but I really think that he's just going to see that the Colossus is down, start some Viking production, potentially take a 3rd base, potentially maybe an in-base command center, and then fall back from there. So the factory is actually finished, and it does have a tech lab that has been built on top of it. So is that going to mean that we're going to be seeing some siege tanks out of our Terran player? Maybe. So you see a third Nexus just now coming down for RemarK, as well as +2 weapon upgrades and +1 armor. A Templar Archives, there it is, I got tongue-tied there for a moment. A Templar Archives is also in production, so we will be seeing Storm being added in with these Colossus in just a moment. Now, these Nexus did, of course, see the fact that those 2 medevacs were there, but did RemarK see the fact that those medevacs are there? I don't think he did. Those medevacs are unloading their cargo of Marines. There's a single Colossus that's by itself that's really bad for RemarK. He doesn't want to lose a Colossus to these Bioforces if he can avoid it, but it does look like he might, and so those Bioforces do manage to take down that Nexus. Emergency Thrust is going to be activated on these medevacs in just a moment in order to get them away from the fight, but instead he is going to be dropping down on top of these other 2 additional Colossus. Really nice play here from our Terran player. He has a goal in mind. He wants to eliminate the Colossus count as quickly as he can, and he's already been able to accomplish that goal very, very nicely, and he's able to get out with all of his medevacs. Look at that emergency thruster upgrade from those medevacs. They are able to just book it out of that fight, back to the reinforcements that are being rallied across the map. And I think that our Terran player is not done yet here. He wants to unload these units here, get them back to the air cover of those Vikings, and continue the attack again, especially now that the Colossus count for RemarK has dwindled a little bit. There's only a single Colossus out in the field. Another one is in production, but Templar Tech has also finished. Psionic Storm is more than halfway done. And we will be seeing Storm being added into this army shortly, and we have no Ghost Academy down for our Terran player, so he is completely unprepared for this transition into Templar Tech. He's going to have to rely strictly on his micro ability with those Bioforces if he wants to make this aggression continue. RemarK did, of course, get down that Nexus much earlier than our Terran player is now getting down his 3rd command center, so our Terran player is behind economically a little bit. He can't afford to let up on this aggression. He needs to be able to cause some economic damage, or at least force out additional units and not probes out of RemarK if he wants to stay in this game. RemarK has already taken a supply lead of 142 to 124, so if this trend continues, he's going to get further and further ahead of our Terran player, who is going for some drop play, but is being denied very, very nicely by some really good positioning of those units. And the Colossus over here on the high ground is going to be able to deny very, very nicely the attack from our Terran player over here at the 3rd base. So some really, really nice splitting of the forces from our Terran player. He was able to divide up those Colossus very, very nicely to be able to deal with both attacks at once. Both attacks that, again, are very, very mineral heavy with no armor. These Marines just die so quickly to these Colossus. We got some Vikings out on the field now to deal with the Colossus, but like I said before, there's nothing actually out on the field to deal with those Templar, and without the Caduceus Reactor upgrade, those Bioforces die so fast to Storm, just like they do in Wings of Liberty, and it does look like our Protoss player is going to be able to clean up this attack very, very easily. He did lose those Colossus, but the entire army for our Terran player was just completely destroyed, and that forced the Vikings to land, and knowing how far behind he was economically, that forced our Terran player to leave the game. No GG was called, but at this point you can say that a GG was very necessary because RemarK played that very, very well. Alright, so, I mean, clearly, what happened here, the critical moment in this game, was when RemarK scouted the fact that his opponent was going for a very heavy Marine build at the beginning, with light on the Marauders. That triggered him into going for an early 2-base Colossus build, as opposed to going for that Templar tech that we see so often from Protoss players like Parting. That has a lot of advantages, but the one thing that it allows you to do is defend against drop tech, and it allows you to use like force fields and whatnot too. Because if you're going for early like Marauder heavy styles, you're able to use up force fields to deny your opponent with just force fields and zealots. But if it's just Marines, that's a little bit more difficult to do because the number of units are so much greater, because you're able to just produce more of them because they're cheaper. With that in mind, going for that earlier Colossus tech, it's a little bit better, because your opponent, well, first of all, your opponent's army is not as good against just Colossus. They don't have the range, they don't have the plus armor attack to deal with them. But the other thing it does is it forces them to spend the gas that they were trying to save on Vikings. That cuts into their medevac production, that cuts into their upgrades, and because they're spending that extra money on getting out Vikings to deal with your Colossus, lest they die to a 2-base attack, it slows them down on taking that 3rd base if they already have not. If they have taken a 3rd base, that gives you a whole other slew of options as a Protoss player to go for a big timing attack, that if they've gone for that 3rd base, it means that their defensive units are not as they're not as plentiful. So a 2 base attack with extended thermal lance's Colossus on a 3 base Terran that's mostly gone for Marines, very strong attack. So it was a nice recognition there by RemarK, seeing what his opponent was going for, seeing how he was playing the early game, and it paid out dividends for him. He pretty much wanted every single. There's a series of checkpoints that I think of in TVP. He wanted every single checkpoint, every single thing that could have gone either way. It went RemarK's way. The exception being the early loss of that Stalker to those Marines. That's like probably the only thing that's probably the only checkpoint that RemarK really lost. Okay, so our last replay I think is going to be again from because I've done at this point a Terran versus Protoss, a Terran versus Zerg, a Protoss versus Protoss. The only thing I have not done is a Protoss versus Zerg, and I want to get into one of those. Because I think that it is important. This will be pretty quick. All right, so we have this game's only 14 minutes long, so this is not going to be too long of a game. Just to finish things up here for a little bit. So this is again from the RemarK replay pack. Thank you once again to RemarK of Team Fallacy for submitting this replay pack on Team Liquid. And of course borrowing it without your permission, but I don't think that you mind too much, especially since I'm giving you such a nice player introduction down here in the bottom left corner of the map Cloud Kingdom. And this is a map that I'm sure everyone is familiar with at this point. We have our red Protoss player from Team Fallacy playing on his Korean account by the looks of things on the beta. He is Fallacy's RemarK. And spawning over here in the top right, we have our blue Zerg with a very simple name. He is Blade. I wonder if Blade has any remarks about the fact that RemarK is using Asian characters in his name when clearly he is from North America. Okay, so Protoss versus Zerg. As much as I want to say that it's radically different and the openings for both races are completely different, and I don't have to just talk about something else for the first few minutes of the game, it's not the case. It's so common just to see both players just go for a very early Forge Fast Expand, 14 pull, gasless hatchery for the Zerg player. Very few things are different early on, but as soon as I say that, of course, as soon as I say that, we see something different from RemarK. I need to stop predicting things coming out of the metagame for Heart of the Swarm, because clearly players do not play the way that I think they are going to. At least today. Maybe just today is my day, because we have a single gateway going down for RemarK as well as an assimilator. So this is going to symbolize a very early form of aggression. You do not go for this kind of build if you are going to be very, very passive. You just don't do it. You just never see it. If you're going to be going for a gateway and just sell it maybe, or if you're going to wall off here at the front, then that means for a Nexus. But it's just really hard to get out the mineral count that you need for a fast Nexus if you have 3 probes dedicated to mining from an assimilator. It's just the way StarCraft works, guys. If you've got a limited number of workers, and some of them are harvesting gas and some of them are harvesting minerals, you wouldn't have as many minerals as if they were just all harvesting minerals. It's just the way the game works. So it's no surprise there that RemarK is just clearly going to be going for something aggressive with this build. Now, meanwhile, for our Zerg player Blade, he is throwing down this gas, which does mean that he wants to go for some earlier speed. There's going to be a pause in this game, which of course the replay just does not pick up on. Which is nice, because I don't want to have to fill time in a pause, which I would have to in a live casting game. So now two gases are down for our Protoss player. Our Zerg player has scouted the fact that there is, of course, no expansion here, and does see the fact that there is a Cybernetics core in production. So this is going to be a red flag for Blade that he is going to have to prepare for something that is going to be coming at him early. He doesn't exactly know what it's going to be, but he does, of course, know that there is going to be something on the way. So that might trigger him to throw down some spine crawlers. It might trigger him to throw down an earlier roach warren, but it should trigger him into building something other than just drones for the next couple minutes. He is going to try and get some scouting information on his Protoss opponent. He is going to scout once again to see if it is simply just a delayed Nexus, but in fact, he is going to see that that Nexus is still not there, and that a pylon is being dropped as well. So I'm really wondering what Blade is going to be going for defensively to stop this early aggression that is going to be coming from RemarK. I'm still trying to figure out what it is, what it's actually going to be. He does have two gases down. He has not constructed any additional gateways, and it is going to be a Nexus. Alright, well that should be a breath of fresh air for Blade. He is going to see that the fact that Nexus is going down, and that is going to trigger him into making some more drones. Because he's going to be like, oh, you're making a Nexus. Cool. I thought you were about to all-in me on one base. I was getting worried there for a second. I was getting worried there for a second that that's what RemarK was about to do. But instead, he is dropping down that Nexus, and he is going to be going for a robotics facility and a forge following this. So this is going to be a one-gate sentry expand into Robo Forge. I mean, this is not your typical Protoss versus Zerg opening. I've seen it a couple of times on Wings of Liberty, but it's not very common. Not very common at all. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, if the Zerg player tries to be really, really aggressive with you, it's really hard to get this initial Nexus out. But Blade wasn't going for that at all. He is just going to sit back at his base. He's just going to continue to make drones, and he is making a lot of drones. He's already at 31 drones with 2 hatcheries already at full production, 5 more drones in production as well. And RemarK is going for some Immortal tech. And he's going to be moving out on the map with a single Immortal and some sentries. No upgrades are being started for our Protoss player. He only has that single gateway down as well, so I don't think this attack is actually going to be a full-on attack. It's really hard to attack as a Protoss player, but the only thing you have is one gateway to reinforce with. It's kind of the way Protoss works too. You want to get out as many. You want it to really abuse the fact that Protoss can have instantaneous reinforcements across the map. You don't want to move out if you don't have those. Which is, of course, again, going to give our Zerg player plenty of time to build up the drone count that he wants before he starts going into whatever tech choice he wants to go for. Now, he is dropping 2 evolution chambers, which typically is going to mean some form of Zergling-heavy play, especially considering that there is no Roach Horn already down in the field. So this could be a kind of early... Oh, this also could be for a tech up into Roach Hydralisk for double upgrades. So we'll have to see exactly what kind of upgrades Blade wants to start, because he still has not started any significant tech structures. There we go. We have the Infestation Pit being thrown down, which, excuse me, in Wings of Liberty would obviously mean that he's going to be going for something like heavy Roach, heavy Infestor Zergling, but in Heart of the Swarm, it could be a couple of different things. But the fact that he is throwing down melee and card-based upgrades does tell me that it is going to be something similar to Infestor Zergling. We could be seeing Swarm Hosts, but Swarm Hosts without the upgrades, not quite as likely. Oh, but he does cancel both of those upgrades. It's almost like he hears me talking to him. Okay, so the Infestation Pit is finished. These Protoss units are moving out on the map, and Swarm Hosts are in production, in fact. So perhaps it was the presence of these units moving across the map that is going to tell our Zerg player Blade that something is up. He needs defensive units immediately, so he is going to be getting down these Swarm Hosts. 5 Swarm Hosts, 6 Swarm Hosts are now in production. They are going to finish before this attack even gets to the 3rd base of our Zerg player, or are they? They should be finishing in just a moment. Here come the Swarm Hosts now. A couple Swarm Hosts with their creepy, like, the creepy buggy goodness that they have, and they are not in a position to really defend against this attack at the 3rd base. So with the Immortal DPS in this army, he's going to get the kill on that hatchery immediately. There are Locusts now being spawned, which of course is going to tell RemarK that he is going to be facing Swarm Hosts as the tech of choice. There is another Swarm Host in production, but this army supply from RemarK is so high that I'm not sure that these Locusts are actually going to be enough by themselves, especially if they are not being all rallied together at once. You have them kind of coming in waves. So here come the Locusts. The Locusts are running into a brick wall of Zealots. The Zealots are getting killed by the relatively high DPS of these Locusts. And it does look like additional Zealots are being warped in, and it's just straight Zealots at this point that are just taking and killing off these Swarm Hosts so well. There is no detection out of the map for our Protoss players, so we can't actually see the Swarm Hosts. He is losing units to the Locust, but there's just not enough DPS in this army. There are 28 Zerglings now in production, but with nothing here to actually stop the Locust from spawning. There is a single observer now coming in. RemarK does know where these Locusts are spawning, so he can, of course, see them. He's going to try and get some focus firing down on those Swarm Hosts in just a moment. He does see the Swarm Host now. A single Swarm Host does go down, but it does look like there might just be enough Zerg units here to actually hold this attack off, but no, Blade is going to back up with those Swarmos. He's going to try and reposition them, get some additional Locusts out. There goes an additional spawn of Locusts, and I do think that with this spawn of Locusts and with no more additional Zealot tanks, RemarK is going to be pushed back to the reinforcing pylon where additional Zealots are being worked in, but I think that might do it. Of course, the Locusts do expire before they can really do anything, which is going to, of course, cause another wave of attacks to be imminent. And there's still only 14 Zerglings in production to go with these Locusts. These Locusts need some kind of tank in order to defend against the damage that is just being done to them by these Zealots. There are a lot of Zealots that are dying to these Locusts, but without anything to actually kill the Immortals and hit sentries in the back, this attack is just going to continue. And our Zerg player has plenty of resources to try and make additional units, but he just doesn't have the larva to hold this attack off. That's why that Hacker Hatchery is in production, but I just don't think it's going to be in time. That Observer is being chased away by that Queen, which is a really nice tactic that is being used. The Observer the Observer did survive. The Overseer does get taken out as well as the Queen, and this was a really smart move by Blade to try and get that Observer away so that the Immortals could not kill the Swarm Hosts, but at this point, I think there's just too many units here for RemarK, and there's only a single super post left. There's not enough DPS in this army. There's not enough larva for Blade, who does BM before leaving the game, and that was it. That will do it. So an Immortal Sentry all in, following a kind of awkward opening here from RemarK, who did throw down some pylons just to protect himself from Zergling run-bys, is going to end Blade before he can ever really get his defense going. And I think the real key to why this works so well for RemarK and why Blade wasn't able to successfully defend his base is really just kind of tied up in the banked resources that both players have. RemarK had the production to continue reinforcing that attack. He had a lot of gateways down. What's this now? 7 gateways down. So he was able to warp in 7 Zealots at a time. These Zealots had +1 on them as well. But the one thing that Blade did not have is the larva production that he needed to get out units, and he didn't have roaches really either. So the only thing he was able to defend his base with were Zerglings, and he didn't have Zerglings are obviously very larva intensive, and he didn't have the production to keep up with that. I think that if he had had that macro hatchery down earlier, he would have held that attack for sure. That was a really good demonstration of how strong Swarm Host can be defensively against Protoss players. Those Swarm Hosts, they definitely paid for themselves. So many Protoss units were actually killed in that attack. I think if we actually look at it from, 49 Protoss units were actually killed in that. Most of those, I think, were Zealots at this point. These Locusts just do so much damage. They do 13 damage a shot, which is the same as a Roach. And you guys saw it. If we go back here just a little bit. Go back here just a little bit to the attack. Let me get to a particular part in here. I just want to kind of demonstrate just like how good Locusts can be if the Protoss units don't have Zealots to tank for them. Alright, so we see here how the Locusts fare with the Zealots in front. There's nothing to actually combat the range DPS behind the Zealots. The Locusts get cleared out relatively quickly. The Protoss Army is able to move forward, only losing Zealots that are, of course, able to be reinforced very easily from the Warp Prism or the Proxy Pylon. Now, however, if we let it run just a little bit, alright. Watch as these Zealots get cleaned up, what the next spot of Locusts is able to do. You see that? That spot of Locusts, especially with that spot of Zerglings right after that, spawned right on top of the units of the Protoss player, nearly killed an Immortal, did kill several Zealots, and it had the ability to kill some sentries as well. If those Zerglings were also in the mix to kind of tie up the Zealots, there's no way that RemarK would have been able to continue that attack forward. He would have lost too many units. At this point, the Zerg player has already very cost-effectively held this Protoss attack off. Look at this, 2,000 resources to 1,525. The only time that the Zerg player starts to lose in terms of how much army is being exchanged is when these Swarm Hosts die. Those free units just play out so effectively in terms of pure cost effectiveness of an army in holding an attack off. But what's the real problem here? This is the real problem. 715 resources, 2 larvae. That's the problem. The queen died in the defense of that attack. A second queen is in production. No macro hatch. Where a macro hatch already completed, the additional larva that macro hatch would have provided would have allowed for enough Zergling support to these swarm hosts to be able to hold this attack off. The other thing that just did not happen was that he didn't spend any of this gas. Not on roaches, not on more swarm hosts, nothing. He was just trying to hold this attack off with straight Zerglings. And that just didn't work out so well, especially if he just didn't have the larva to hold this off. So it wasn't well executed all in by our Protoss player. If our Zerg player had corrected a couple mistakes in his defense, I think he would have held it. So that will do it for today. I have... oh man, I wasn't even showing... sorry about that, guys. I had switched to my other view and I wasn't even showing that last part. Yeah. So that will do it for today. I'm trying to get back into these casts as often as I can. I want to show more of the Heart of the Swarm beta, try to get the discussion going on some of the new units. I want to get more current replay packs available. So on that note, I will leave everybody with this. If you are in the Heart of the Swarm beta, and you have a current replay that you think kind of shows some of the new units off, shows some of the new strategies off, or even how to hold some of the attacks or how to defeat some of the strategies that are being developed with some of the older units, tried and true strategies versus anything current that's good from the Heart of the Swarm beta that you would like me to cast, that you would like me to break down and analyze and kind of put out on the internet for further discussion, please send it to me. You can send it to me through a direct message on Twitter. You can send it to me on my Team Liquid account, which is Vindicare605 on Team Liquid. You can send it to me on ktvindicare@hotmail.com. Any of those things work. I am open at this point to more and more replays from people who want to see how the Heart of the Swarm beta is playing out and how everything kind of works out. So for today at least, I am KT Vindicare and I'm finished for today.